Apostolic Letter, Drawing New Maps of Hope, of Pope Leo XIV on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the Conciliar Declaration, Gravissimum educationis. 1. Preamble 1.1. Drawing New Maps of Hope. October 28, 2025 marks the 60th anniversary of the Conciliar Declaration, Gravissimum educationis, on the extreme importance and current relevance of education in human life. With that text, the Second Vatican Council reminded the Church that education is not an ancillary activity, but forms the very fabric of evangelization. It is the concrete way in which the gospel becomes an educational gesture, a relationship, a culture. Today, in the face of rapid change and disorienting uncertainties, that legacy is showing surprising resilience, where educational communities allow themselves to be guided by the word of Christ. They do not retreat, but are revitalized. They do not build walls, but bridges. They respond with creativity, opening up new possibilities for the transmission of knowledge and meaning in schools, universities, professional and civic training, schools and youth ministry, research, because the gospel does not grow old, but makes, quote, all things new, end quote, Revelation 21:5. Each generation hears it as a regenerating novelty. Each generation is responsible for the gospel and for discovering its seminal and multiplying power. 1.2. We live in a complex, fragmented, digitized educational environment. Precisely for this reason, it's wise to pause and refocus our gaze on the, quote, cosmology of Christian paideia, end quote, a vision that over the centuries has been able to renew itself and positively inspire all of the multifaceted aspects of education. Since its origins, the gospel has generated, quote, educational constellations, end quote, experiences that are both humble and powerful, capable of interpreting the times, of preserving the unity between faith and reason, between thought and life, between knowledge and justice. In stormy weather, they have been a lifeline. In calm weather, they have been a sail unfurled, a beacon in the night to guide navigation. 1.3. The Declaration Gravissimum educationis has lost none of its potency, since its reception has given rise to a constellation of works and charisms that still guide the way today. Schools and universities, movements and institutes, lay associations, religious congregations, and national and international networks. Together, these living bodies have consolidated a spiritual and pedagogical heritage capable of traversing the 21st century and responding to the most pressing challenges. This heritage is not set in stone. It's a compass that continues to point the way and speak of the beauty of the journey. Expectations today are no less than those the Church faced 60 years ago. Indeed, they have expanded and become more complex. Faced with the many millions of children around the world who still do not have access to primary education, how can we fail to act? Confronted with the dramatic educational emergencies caused by wars, migration, inequalities, and various forms of poverty, how can we not feel the urgency to renew our commitment? Education, as I recalled in my apostolic exhortation, Dilexite, quote, is one of the highest expressions of Christian charity, end quote. As from Dilexite, Article 68. The world needs this form of hope. 2. A dynamic history. The Church is, quote, mother and teacher, end quote. That's from John the 23rd's encyclical Mater Magistra. Not by supremacy, but through service. She accompanies the growth of freedom, taking on the mission of the divine master so that everyone, quote, may have life, have it abundantly, end quote. That's John 10:10. The educational styles that have succeeded one another show a vision of man as the image of God, called to truth and goodness in a multiplicity of methods at the service of this calling. Educational charisms are not rigid formulas. They are original responses to the needs of each era. 2.2. In the early centuries, the Desert Fathers taught wisdom through parables and apophthegms. They discovered the path to the essential, to discipline of speech and guardianship of the heart. They transmitted a pedagogy of the gaze that recognizes God everywhere. St. Augustine, grafting biblical wisdom onto the Greco-Roman tradition, understood that the authentic teacher arouses the desire for truth, educates freedom to read the signs and listen to the inner voice. Monasticism perpetuated this tradition in the most inaccessible places, where for decades the classical works were studied, commented on, and taught, so much so that without this silent work in the service of culture, many masterpieces would not have survived to the present day. Then, quote, from the heart of the Church, end quote, the first universities were born, which from their origins proved to be, quote, an incomparable center of creativity, a dissemination of knowledge for the good of humanity, end quote. That's from John Paul II's Apostolic Constitution Ex Corde Ecclesiae, Article 1. In their halls, speculative thought found, through the meditation of the mendicant orders, the possibility of structuring itself solidly, pushing itself to the frontiers of science. Many religious congregations took their first steps in these fields of knowledge, urging education in a pedagogically innovative and socially visionary way. 2.3. It has expressed itself in many ways. In the Ratio Studiorum, the richness of the scholastic tradition blends with Ignatian spirituality, adapting a curriculum that is as articulated as it is interdisciplinary and open to experimentation. In the 17th century Rome, St. Joseph Calsans opened free schools for the poor, sensing that literacy and some numeracy are a matter of dignity even before they are a matter of competence. In France, St. John Baptiste de la Salle, quote, realizing the injustice caused by the exclusion of the children of workers and ordinary people from the educational system, end quote, from the 14th Apostolic Exhortation, Publicité number 69, founded the Brothers of the Christian Schools. At the beginning of the 19th century, again in France, St. Marcelin Champagnat dedicated himself, quote, wholeheartedly to the mission of educating and evangelizing children and young people, especially those most in need, during a period when access to education continued to be the privilege of a few, end quote. It's from Delexite Article 70. Similarly, St. John Bosco, with his, quote, preventative method, end quote, transformed discipline into reasonableness and closeness. Courageous women such as Vicenta Maria Lopez y Vicuña, Francesca Cabrini, Josefina Bakhita, Maria Montessori, Catherine Drexel, and Elizabeth Ann Seton opened doors for girls, migrants, and the marginalized. I reiterate what I clearly stated in Delexite, quote, for the Christian faith, the education of the poor is not a favor, but a duty, end quote. That's from Article 72. This genealogy of practical action testifies that in the church, pedagogy is never disembodied theory, but flesh, passion, and history. 3. A living tradition. 3.1. Christian education is a collective endeavor. No one educates alone. The educational community is a we in quotes, where teachers, students, families, administrative and service staff, pastors, and civil society converge to generate life. There he's referencing the Congregation for Catholic Education, Instruction, the Identity of the Catholic School for a Culture of Dialogue, from January 25th, 2022, Article 32. This, we in quotes, prevents water from stagnating in the swamp of, quote, it has always been done this way, end quote, and forces it to flow, to nourish, to irrigate. The foundation remains the same for the person, image of God, that he's referencing Genesis 1:26, capable of truth and relationship. Therefore, the question of the relationship between faith and reason is not an optional chapter. Quote, religious truth, capital R and T, is not only a portion, but a condition of general knowledge, end quote. That's from John Henry Newman's The Idea of a University, page 76. These words of St. John Henry Newman, whom in the context of this jubilee of the world of education, I have great joy of declaring co-patron of the Church's educational mission together with St. Thomas Aquinas, are an invitation to renew our commitment to knowledge that is as intellectually responsible and rigorous as it is deeply human. We must also be careful not to fall into the trap of an enlightenment of a fides paired exclusively with ratio. We need to emerge from the shallows by recovering an empathetic and open vision, and to understand better how humankind understands itself today in order to develop and deepen our teaching. This is why desire and the heart must not be separated from knowledge. It would mean splitting the person. Catholic universities and schools are places where questions are not silenced and doubt is not banished but accompanied. The heart, there, dialogue with the heart, and the method is that of listening that recognizes the other as an asset, not a threat. Cor ad cor loquitur was St. John Henry Newman's Cardinal's motto, taken from the letter of St. Francis de Sales, quote, sincerity of heart, or abundance of words, touches the hearts. Not the abundance of words touches the hearts of men, end quote. 3.2. Educating is an act of hope and a passion that is renewed because it manifests the promise we see in the future of humanity. That's a reference to the Congregation for Catholic Education's Instrumentum Laboris Educating Today and Tomorrow Renewing Passion in the introduction. The specificity, depth, and breadth of educational action is the work, as mysterious as it is real, of, quote, making the being flourish, is taking care of the soul, end quote, as we read in Plato's Apology of Socrates, 30a through b. It's a, quote, profession of promises, end quote. It promises time, confidence, skill. It promises justice and mercy. It promises the courage of truth and the balm of consolation. Educating is a labor of love that is handed down from generation to generation, mending the torn fabric of relations and restoring the weight of promise to words, quote, every man is capable of truth, yet the journey is much more bearable when one goes forward with the help of another, end quote. That's from Bishop Robert F. Prevost of him before he was Pope, Order of St. Augustine, Homily de Cattolica Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo, 2018. Truth is sought in community. Now we're in 4. The Compass of Gravissimum educationis, 4.1. The Conciliar Declaration, Gravissimum educationis, reaffirms the right of every person to education and indicates the family is the first school of humanity. The ecclesial community is called upon to support environments that integrate faith and culture, respect the dignity of all, and engage in dialogue with society. The doctrine warns against reducing education to functional trading or an economic tool. A person is not a, quote, skills profile, end quote, cannot be reduced to a predictable algorithm, but is a face, story, of vocation. 4.2. Christian formation embraces the entire person, spiritual, intellectual, emotional, social, physical. It does not pit manual and theoretical skills, science and humanism, technology and conscience against each other. Rather, it demands that professionalism be imbued with ethics, and that ethics be not an abstract concept but a daily practice. Education does not measure its value only on the axis of efficiency. It measures it according to dignity, justice, the capacity to serve the common good. This integral anthropological vision must remain the cornerstone of Catholic pedagogy. Following in the wake of the thoughts of St. John Henry Newman, it goes against a strictly mercantilist approach that often forces education today to be measured in terms of functionality and practical utility. And there he's referencing John Henry Newman's writings on the University, 2001. 4.3. These principles are not memories from the past. They are guiding stars. They say that the truth is sought together, that freedom is not a whim but an answer, that authority is not domination but service. In the educational context, one must never, quote, claim to possess a monopoly on truth, either in its analysis of problems or its proposal of concrete solutions, end quote. This is from Leo XIV's Audience of Members of the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, May 17, 2025. Instead, quote, knowing best how to approach them is more important than providing immediate responses to why things happen or how to deal with them. The aim is to learn to confront problems, for these are always different, since every generation is new and faces new challenges, dreams, and questions, end quote, from the same address to the Centesimus what is it called? Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation. Catholic education has the task of rebuilding trust in a world riven with conflicts and fears, remembering that we are sons and daughters, not orphans. Fraternity is born of this awareness. 5. The centrality of the person. 5.1. Putting the person at the center means educating them to see with the far-sightedness of Abraham. There's reference to Genesis 15:5. Helping them discover the meaning of life, their inalienable dignity, and their responsibility towards others. Education is not only the transmission of content, but also the learning of virtues. It forms citizens capable of serving and believers capable of witnessing, men and women who are freer, no longer alone. And formation cannot be improvised. I fondly remember the years I spent on the beloved Diocese of Chiclayo visiting the Catholic University of San Toribio de Mogrovejo. The opportunities I had to address the academic community saying, quote, we are not born professionals. Every university itinerary is built step by step, book by book, year by year, sacrifice after sacrifice, end quote. That's from his homily at that university in 2016. And then 5.2. The Catholic school is an environment in which faith, culture, and life intertwine. It's not simply an institution, but rather a living environment in which the Christian vision permeates every discipline and every interaction. Educators are called to a responsibility that goes beyond the work contract. Their witness has the same value as their lessons. For this reason, the formation of teachers, scientific, pedagogic, cultural, and spiritual, is decisive. Sharing the common educational mission also demands a path of common formation, quote, an initial and permanent project of formation that is able to grasp the educational challenges of the present time, to provide the most effective tools for dealing with them. This implies that educators must be willing to learn and develop knowledge, be open to the renewal and updating of methodologies, but open also to spiritual and religious formation and sharing, end quote. That's from the Congregation of Catholic Education circular letter, Educating Together in Catholic Schools, from September 8, 2007, Article 20. Technical updates are not enough. It's necessary to cultivate a heart that listens, a gaze that encourages, and an intelligence that discerns. 5.3. The family remains the first place of education. Catholic schools collaborate with parents. They do not substitute them because the, quote, duty devolves primarily on them, end quote. That's from Vatican II's Dogmatic, the Pastoral Constitution of the Church and the Category Gaudium et Spes, Article 48. The Educational Alliance requires intentionality, listening, and co-responsibility. It's built with processes, tools, shared assessments. It's both hard work and a blessing. When it works, it inspires trust. When it fails, everything becomes more fragile. 6. Identity and subsidiarity. 6.1. Gravissimum educationis already accorded great importance to the principle of subsidiarity and the fact that circumstances vary according to different local ecclesial contexts. However, the Second Vatican Council articulated the right to education and its founding principles as universally valid. It highlighted the responsibilities placed on both parents and the state. Consider the provision of an education that enables students to, quote, evaluate moral values with a right conscience, end quote. That's from Gravissimum educationis 1, to be a, quote, sacred right, end quote, and called on civil leaders to respect this right. It also warned against subordinating education to the labor market and to the often harsh and human logic of finance. 6.2. Christian education resembles a choreography. My late predecessor, Pope Francis, said, quote, we're to bring about a new choreography, in quotes, one that respects the dance, in quotes, of life a putting the human person at the center. End quote. That's from Pope Francis' address to university students on the occasion of World Youth Day, August 3rd, 2023. To form the, quote, whole, end quote, person means avoiding compartmentalization. When it is true, faith is not an added subject in quotes, but a breath that oxygenates every other subject. Thus, Catholic education becomes leaven in the human community. It generates reciprocity, overcomes reductionism, and opens up to social responsibility. The task today is to dare to pursue an integral humanism that addresses the questions of our time without losing sight of its source. 7. The contemplation of creation. 7.1. Christian anthropology is the basis of an educational style that promotes respect, personalized accompaniment, discernment, and the development of all the human dimensions. Among these, spiritual athletus is not secondary, and it's fulfilled and strengthened also through the contemplation of creation. This aspect is not new in the Christian philosophical and theological tradition, in which the study of nature also had the purpose of demonstrating the traces of God, vestigia Dei, in our world. In the Collationis in Exameron, St. Bonaventure of Bagnoregio writes that, quote, the entire world is a shadow, a path, an imprint. It's a book written from outside. He's referencing Ezekiel, I believe, 2:9. Because in every creature there is a reflection of the divine model, but mixed with darkness. The world is therefore a path similar to opacity mixed with light. In this sense, it's a path. Just as you see now a ray of light entering through a window, it's colored according to the different colors of the different parts of the glass. The divine ray is reflected differently in each creature and takes on different properties. That's from St. Bonaventure's Collationis in Exameron 12 in Opera Omnia, pages 87-88 from an edition published in Paris. This applies also in the plasticity of teaching tailored to different characters, which in any case converge on the beauty of the creation and its preservation. It requires educational projects that are, quote, interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary, carried out with wisdom and creativity, end quote. That's from Pope Francis' Apostolic Constitution, Veritatis Gaudium, from December 8, 2017, number 4C. 7.2. Forgetting our common humanities has given rise to divisions and violence, and when the earth suffers, the poor suffer the most. Catholic education cannot be silent. It must combine social justice and environmental justice, promote sobriety and sustainable lifestyles, and form consciences capable of choosing not merely what is convenient, but what is just. Every small gesture, avoiding waste, choosing responsibly, defending the common good, constitutes cultural and moral literacy. 7.3. Ecological responsibility is not limited to technical data. These are necessary, but they are not enough. There's a need for education that involves the mind, the heart, and the hands, new habits, community lives, community styles, virtuous practices. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the gentle strength that rejects violence. An education in, quote, unarmed and disarming, end quote, peace, and that's, he's quoting himself from his first words as Pope on May 8th, 2025, teaches us to set down the weapons of the aggressive word and the judgmental look in order to learn the language of mercy and reconcile justice. 8. An educational constellation, 8.1. I speak of a constellation in quotes because the world of Catholic education is a living and pluralistic network. Parish schools and colleges, universities and institutes of higher education, professional training centers, movements, digital platforms, service-laying initiatives in school, university, and cultural pastoral programs. Each star in quotes has its own brightness, but together they chart a course. Where in the past there was rivalry, now we ask the institutions to converge. Unity is our most prophetic strength. 8.2. Methodological and structural differences are not burdens, but resources. The multiplicity of charisms, if well coordinated, composes a coherent and fruitful picture. In an interconnected world, the game is played on two boards, local and global. There's a need for exchanges of teachers and students, joint projects across continents, mutual recognition of good practices, and missionary and academic cooperation. The future demands that we learn to collaborate more and to grow together. 8.3. Constellations reflect their own light in an infinite universe. As in a kaleidoscope, their colors intermingle, creating further chromatic variations. This is what happens at Catholic educational institutions, which are open to meeting and listening to civil society, political and administrative authorities, as well as representatives of productive sectors and professional categories. They are required to collaborate even more actively with them in order to share and improve educational pathways so that the theory may be supported by experience and practice. History also teaches that our institutions welcome students and families who do not believe or who profess other faiths, but who desire a truly human education. For this reason, as is already the case, we must continue to promote participatory educational communities in which lay people, religious, families, and students share responsibility for the educational mission together with public and private institutions. 9. Navigating new spaces. 9.1. 60 years ago, Gravissimum educationis heralded a season of trust. It encouraged the updating of methods and languages. Today, this trust is being tested by the individual environment. Technologies must serve, not replace, the person. They must enrich the learning process, not impoverish relationships and communities. A university and a Catholic school without vision risks soulless efficiency, the standardization of knowledge, which then becomes spiritual impoverishment. 5.2. Pastoral creativity is needed in order to inhabit these spaces, strengthening the formation of teachers, including in the digital sphere, enhancing active teaching, promoting service learning and responsible citizenship, and avoiding any technophobia. Attitude towards technology can never be hostile because, quote, technological progress is part of God's plan for creation, end quote. That's from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Dicastery for Culture and Education, note, Antiqua et Nova, January 28, 2025, number 117. But it requires discernment in didactic planning, evaluation, platforms, data protection, and equitable access. In any case, no algorithm can substitute what makes education human: poetry, irony, love, art, imagination, the joy of discovery, and even learning from mistakes is an opportunity for growth. 9.3. The decisive point is not technology, but the use we make of it. Artificial intelligence and digital environments must be oriented towards the protection of dignity, justice, and work. They must be governed according to criteria of public ethics and participation. They must be accompanied by adequate theological and philosophical reflection. Catholic universities have a decisive task to offer a, quote, diaconia of culture, end quote, fewer chair professorships and more tables to sit around, without unnecessary hierarchies, to touch the wounds of history and seek in the spirit, capital S, the wisdom that springs from the lives of peoples. 10. The lodestar of, or iode star of the Compact on Education. 10.1. One of the stars that guide our path is the Global Compact on Education. I gratefully accept this prophetic legacy entrusted to us by Pope Francis. It's an invitation to form an alliance and networks to educate in universal fraternity. Its 7 pathways remain our foundation, putting the person at the center, listening to children and young people, promoting the dignity and full participation of women, recognizing the family as the first educator, opening ourselves to welcome and inclusion, renewing the economy and politics in the service of humanity, and caring for our common home. These stars and quotes have inspired schools, universities, and educational communities around the world, giving rise to concrete processes of humanization. 10.2. 60 years after Gravissimum educationis and 5 years after the Compact, history calls to us with fresh urgency. Rapid and deep changes expose children, teenagers, and young people to unprecedented fragility. It's not enough to conserve it. It must be relaunched. I ask all the educational bodies to inaugurate a season that speaks to the heart of the new generations, reconstituting knowledge and meaning, competence and responsibility, faith and life. The Compact is part of a broader global educational constellation. Charisms and institutions, though diverse, form a unified luminous design that guides our steps in the darkness of the present time. 10.3. To the 7 paths, I would add 3 priorities. The first regards the inner life. Young people ask for depth. They need spaces for silence, discernment, and dialogue with their conscience and with God. The second regards the digital human. Let us educate in a judicious use of technology and of AI, placing the person before the algorithm and harmonizing technical, emotional, social, spiritual, and ecological intelligence. The third regards unarmed and disarming peace. Let us educate in nonviolent languages, reconciliation bridges, and not walls. Quote, blessed are the peacemakers, end quote. That's Matthew 5:9. Becomes the method and content of learning. 10.4. We are aware that the Catholic Educational Network has a unique reach. It's a constellation that spans every continent, with a particular presence in low-income areas, a concrete promise of educational mobility and social justice. There he's referring to the Statistical Yearbook of the Church, updated on December 31st, 2022. This constellation demands quality and courage, quality in pedagogical planning, teacher training and governance, courage in ensuring access to the poorest, supporting fragile families, and promoting scholarships and inclusive policies. Evangelical gratuitousness is not rhetoric. It's a style of relationship, a method, and an objective. Where access to education remains privileged, the church must push to open doors and invent new paths because, quote, losing the poor, end quote, is equivalent to losing the school itself. This also applies to universities. An inclusive outlook and attention to the heart save us from standardization. A spirit of service revives the imagination and rekindles love. 11. New maps of hope. 11.1. On the 60th anniversary of Gravissimum educationis, the Church celebrates a fruitful educational history, but also faces the imperative of updating her offerings in light of the signs of the times. Catholic educational constellations are an inspiring image of how tradition and future can intertwine without contradiction, a living tradition that extends towards a new form of presence and service. Constellations are not reduced to neutral and inert become catenations of different experiences. Instead of chains, let us dare to think of constellations. They are intertwining, full of wonder and awakening. In them lies the ability to navigate challenges with hope, but also with courageous revision, without losing fidelity to the gospel. We are aware of the difficulties. Hyperdigitalization can fragment attention. The crisis of relationships can wound the psyche. Social insecurity and inequalities can extinguish desire. Yet, precisely here, Catholic education could be a beacon, not a nostalgic refuge, but a laboratory of discernment, pedagogical innovation, and prophetic witness. Drawing new maps of hope, this is the urgency of the mandate. 11.2. I ask educational communities, disarm words, raise your eyes, and safeguard the heart. Disarm words, because education does not advance with polemics, but with meekness that knows how to listen. Raise your eyes, as God said to Abraham, quote, look toward heaven and number the stars. Quote, Genesis 15:5 is being quoted there. Know how to ask yourselves where you're going and why. Safeguard the heart. Relationships come before opinions. People before programs. Do not waste time and opportunities. Quote, to quote an Augustinian expression, our present is an intuition, a time we live and must take advantage of before it slips through our fingers. End quote. That's from Bishop Robert Prevost at the time, Pope Leo before he's Pope in 2016. That same homily from earlier. In conclusion, dear brothers and sisters, to make my own the exhortation of the Apostle Paul, you must, quote, shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life. End quote. That's Philippians 2:15-16. 11.3. I entrust this journey to the Virgin Mary, sede sapientiae, and to all the sainted educators. I appeal to pastors, consecrated men and women, lay people, those responsible for institutions, teachers and students, be servants of the world of education, choreographers of hope, tireless seekers of wisdom, credible creators of expressions of beauty, fewer labels, more stories, fewer sterile contrasts, more harmony in the spirit, capital S spirit. Then our constellations will not only shine, but it will also guide us towards the truth that sets us free. There's referencing John 8:32. Towards the fraternity that consolidates justice. There's referencing Matthew 23:8. Towards the hope that does not disappoint. There's referencing Romans 5:5. From St. Peter's Basilica, October 27th, 2025, eve of the 60th anniversary, signed Leo PP 14.